We are absolutely over the moon delighted to be here this afternoon. My name is Bonnie Shepherd.
I'm Laura Purcell.
I'm Deborah.
And we have been to Mozambique. We can tell you all about some of our experiences, time permitting, that is, however. We just loved being part of the orphanage, the first orphanage that was built. And we thought we would just share in some of our experiences today.
Mm-hmm. Yep. We've all got memories. I was thinking about this and really vividly remembered it was probably almost 20 years ago when we were there, 18 years ago. And we were at an orphanage in Telish. And the conditions of these children was absolutely heartbreaking, deplorable. We all remember the living conditions: no electricity, no water. They were sleeping 2 and 3 to a mattress, dirty mattresses.
It was originally designed as a leper colony.
Right.
And I mean, that was the best that they probably could do at the time. So needless to say, the children were isolated from society. They didn't have schooling or clinics or just interaction with other people. So when we arrived, the children were, some of them were just actually sitting on a slate, and they were like an empty shell. There was like no stimulation with the children.
Yeah, it was really heartbreaking for all of us to see. And when we first arrived, just to see the looks on their faces, they were excited to see us because there were people there to visit and invest in them. But at the same time, you could still see the sadness and the heartbreak in their eyes because they really didn't know even really how to interact with people because it had been so long since they'd have outside people coming to really care for them.
Right.
So I think during that first visit, it was we learned really about what they were lacking, and the team of us that was there, we decided that we were going to make a difference, and all of us just came together later that night after we had left, and it was like a given fact that we had to do something to touch these children's lives in a profound way because they weren't going to have a future if we didn't.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I remember one of the very last days that we went, because we went a few times out, the babies were all outside in the sun on a mat, on a straw mat, and they each had a meal. And it was a plate with bread with a little bit of sugar and a little cup of milk. And I can remember sitting down with them, and we were talking. I think it was Karen, another woman, and I were visiting and asking one of the adult women who was with the orphans, is this like a typical meal? And she said, no, this is not typical. What is typical is that they won't have milk tomorrow because we don't have enough funds to give them milk 2 days in a row, so they get milk every other day.
And it just broke our hearts, needless to say. And it was also a lot of stagnant water around the area, so it was malaria infested. And the children, we were holding the children in our arms. They were much older than we thought because they were not developing properly. I mean, there were obviously malnutrition, their stomachs were distended, and we were holding these children knowing that their life expectancy was not great. So we were all in a very tough spot, but we all came together and said, all right, we're going to do this, and we have to do whatever we can to get these children out of here. A few years later, we raised enough funds to move them from Telish to Kambini, which was just an amazing spot for the kids. I remember we brought, the women in our church had given us all a homemade quilt for the children to put on their beds. And when we dedicated one of the dorms, one of our teammates actually brought a stenciling kit because she didn't want it to be institutional looking, gray. She said, let's make it bright like a home for children, not, an orphanage. And there we all were painting bright colors and stenciling and putting fresh new quilts so every child had their own blanket. It was such a happy moment.
And it was so exciting because where the orphanage got those children moved to in Kambini was a spot that had access to resources they otherwise wouldn't have ever had.
They had a clinic.
They had a clinic, they had a school, there were churches there, and there were actually members of the community that lived there that they could interact with. So communicate, social skills was totally important for them.
Right.
Yeah.
And when we went back 3 years later, after when we dedicated the new building, to see the growth that those children had already had, just knowing we'd made a connection with them and had built a relationship even from afar, that they knew that they were loved, and how important that was, and how their smiles had changed immensely, guys. You remember? I mean,
Right.
just like
Yeah.
this little boy, he came running through the sand to come meet us, and his pants were like falling down, and he was like, his hands were dirty, and he had stuff all over his
Right.
face, and he was just like the most beautiful child, though, when you see their
The image,
faces,
yeah.
because they're just so full of spirit and life, and
You saw it in their eyes.
Yeah,
could
you
see it in their
did.
eyes. Yeah.
And-
And to back up, when that last time when we were in Tellish, before the 3 years later, holding Pedro and realizing he was a year old, but he felt like he was 3 months old because he was so malnourished. And I remember leaving that day, and I thought, he's not going to live. I'm not going to see him again, you know? And talking with family when we got back and just saying, you know, we've got to do something. There's this, you know, explaining the whole experience. And I was at a family party, and my mom came over, and she was really concerned about how upset I was. And she said, Laura, you know what? Nobody really wants to talk about this at a party. And I was like, I know nobody wants to talk about it, but I'm still talking about it 20 years later because there are still orphans. But the great ending of that was, too, I mean, that we did make a difference in these children. And Pedro was a tiny baby when I left, and now he is a senior graduating from the School of Agriculture in
Thriving.
Cambini, and he's just doing so beautifully. So we did make a difference, you know, and people will say, oh, you can't make a difference, it's too big of a problem,
Right.
and that's not.
Pedro, when we went back in 2005, he wasn't he the one that was called the
mayor?
mayor
We
of
called him the
Cambini,
mayor because he was so
he-
socially-
his social skills, and he was talking up a storm, and the smile, I can't even, I remember his smile, it was so bright, Laura.
We pinned him the
Oh
mayor.
my gosh,
Yeah.
yeah, he was amazing. And I had a similar experience building with a relationship with a child when I was first there with you guys in 2002. I sat on one of those concrete slabs outside their bedroom, and next to this boy, and I was holding his hand, and I just had this moment of hearing a voice say, adopt this boy. And I knew that I wasn't in a place to physically adopt him at the time, but that there were other ways to do that. And so over the years, I had established writing letters back and forth to him. And today he's nearly 30. I've helped him go learn English. I've supported him to go get his schooling. And he's also in school and looking to graduate. And it's just, he calls me mama. We text back and forth. We have access to that. And my kids who are young, they like ask about their brother periodically, and he asks about his siblings. And it's just such a wonderful thing to be able to know that while the kids didn't necessarily have a family of their own because their parents were sick or died in war or a landmine or whatever, that they have people that love them, and they know that, and it means so much to them and gives them a hope for the
Right,
future.
right.
That,
Yeah.
you know, just giving them that home.
Right.
Yeah.
And that everybody can make that difference. That's the thing.
And
I mean,
so-
we were lucky enough to do that.
We were.
Yeah.
We were.
Really. It's,
And so we're here today, you know, to hopefully raise, obviously, funds, because we're looking to build yet another home for children, but also to raise awareness, because people don't realize just what's going on with these kids. I was thinking about you when you just talked about the party you were at, and people didn't want to hear it. It reminded me of a quick story where I was at a cocktail party in Manhattan. Happened to have my mom with me that night because the next day we were flying out of JFK. So she piggybacked with me, and one of my colleagues come over and said, hey, haven't talked to you in a while, what's going on? Tell me about your kids. And my mom said, oh my God, please don't even ask her about her kids. And he looked at her like, what? And she said, oh, because she's going to be telling you about the orphanage, about the kids in Africa, and blah, blah, blah. And he said, orphanage, I want to hear all about it. So I gave him the whole spiel that, hey, we're trying to raise funds. We raised $60,000 so far, and our goal, I think at the time, was $100,000. And this was for our first orphanage in Tellish, or in Cambini from Tellish. And he leaned down, and he was this tall Asian man, and he leaned down and he said to me, you have just now raised $80,000. He said, I'll have my secretary write a check tomorrow for $20,000. He says, what you don't know is I too was once an orphan. And if it wasn't for people like you to help, I would never be the entrepreneur and successful man I am today. So yes, for him, it did make a difference.
I still get chills hearing
I
that
know,
story.
I
It's like
love it
2
too.
years later.
I love it too. And further to the children not having milk. So there was a program that got into place where there was funds paid ahead for a year, so the children were delivered milk every day. And then we realized that the kids were not getting bread. Bread was like a dessert for them, a big treat. And so now they have a bread oven. It's an outdoor, beautiful bread oven. I think we have a picture of that, where the kids not only get bread every day for themselves, but they're able to make bread and sell it and sustain the program,
Which is so key.
which is, you know, the mentality of don't give me a fish, but, you know, teach me how to fish.
And they also have the farming opportunities there too. There
Absolutely.
was like they were growing peanuts for a while, I think potatoes and stuff.
Yeah.
So part of the concept of this model of taking the orphans and building them a new home where they have house mothers who are there to help raise them and nurture them and love them, and they have their family of brothers and sisters with them, is that they will also be able to go out and do farming and other things around that area, so they can plant gardens and grow their own food, and sustainability is huge because you can't just always keep putting the money. They have to be able to provide for themselves and learn the skills. That's important for them to be able to succeed.
And that there is that school of agriculture, and they are all being taught. Or if they want to go to that school.
Like your friend has a story of being an orphan. We've heard, you know, like the definition of an orphan is with about 1 or 2 parents, and so you think about that, and there are a lot of people that don't have that extra stability.
I mean, the staggering, the numbers of, what is it, over 16,000 children die daily, you know, because of lack of all the necessary, you know, food and clean water and milk, or just living conditions. So anything we can do to help these kids along. We just hope that today we made a difference in your life by sharing some of our stories. And if you're ever interested in becoming a member of our team, to make a trip there to see for yourselves, I mean, go to our website. F4O is a great organization. I'm proud to serve on the board there, and it's a nonprofit 501c, and we hope that you will join us in helping make these children's dreams come true.
Absolutely.